Welcome to the Research to Practice Gap, a podcast that bridges the divide between research and classroom practice. I'm Dr. Helen Flores, and each episode I sit down with an expert whose work informs education and translate their insights into practical, evidence-based strategies you can use in your classroom right away. Today with me, I have Dr. Tabitha Lim. Tabitha is an educator, researcher, and school leader passionate about transforming how we understand learning and well-being. She holds a Doctor of Education from Johns Hopkins University in Mind, Brain, and Teaching, where her research focused on building teacher capacity to support students' socio-emotional health and well-being in high-stakes examinations environments. She serves as the Principal and Director of Curriculum and Instruction at TLS International School in Kota Damansara, with over a decade of teaching experience across the United States and Malaysia, and state certifications in English Language Arts and ESL. She leads with a focus on developing both academic rigor and emotional well-being. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for having me.
It's awesome because you're in Malaysia right now. I am in Florida.
Yes, I am.
So we are 12 hours apart, right? It's 9 p.m. there.
Yes. I'm the opposite side of the world.
I will admit, I did have to look on a map to see where Malaysia is.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's very small.
But thank you so much for joining us. You're my first international guest, so that feels very cool to me.
I am not sure if people know much about Malaysia.
Probably not. If there's something you want to share, sort of set the stage about Malaysia.
Malaysia is a very young country. We were only formed in 1957 after the British colonized us, and then in 1957 we became independent. At that time, there were 3 different branches of education, and they were race-based. So you have a Chinese school just for the Chinese immigrants who came from China, and the Indian Tamil schools for those immigrants who came from India, and then they're called vernacular schools. Their instruction is in Chinese, Mandarin, or Tamil. And then you have kind of like the elite people who have the non-set up schools, and they were taught in English using the British curriculum. When we gained independence, we had a public school system that was still taught in English, but there were some Malay subjects as well. So over time, the public schools became more local and instruction changed to Malay, but we still retained those vernacular schools. So there was this kind of divide between the races and the classes, and some schools are better than others, or if you spoke English at the time fluently, you were better educated than others and you would receive better opportunities. That's when they develop this exams. You take it when you're 12 years old and when you're 17. So when you're 12 years old, if you did really well, you can go on to any good schools you want, or you can continue with the public school system. Long time ago, when my grandmother was a kid, they just had it until 12 years old because they didn't have high schools in Mandarin or Tamil anymore. So that was kind of a way to make sure certain classes or certain people did not receive a higher education. So if you did really well in that 12-year exam, then you get to go to high school. And then at high school, you sit for another exam, and that gets you into the prestigious universities in Malaysia and externally as well. So that system has persisted, and we still have this high-stakes exam for 17-year-olds, and it's still a little bit race-based. So that's like a whole other podcast I could talk about. But basically, if you did really well in that exam, then you can go to good universities. And then if not, there's this idea, of course, that, you're just going to be a failure, or, you're not going to earn as well as others. So that mentality has persisted throughout the years. And there's the Confucianism values that immigrants brought from China, where you have to do your best, be your best, and what you do is a reflection of your family as well. So students have that pressure of, I have to earn lots of money in the future so that my family won't starve, but also I must make sure my family is not shamed by what I'm doing. A lot of family pressure, not just like the nuclear family, but the cousins, uncles, aunts, And then we also have that earning part of things. So that's why high stakes exams, especially in Malaysia, it's very stressful and so anxiety inducing, not just because maybe you didn't sleep, but also because like your parents have all their hopes and dreams on you because maybe they didn't get the education that you got as well. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, because culturally, that is very different here, right? As in the US,
Yeah.
it's a very individualistic society. So the stress for exams is typically just because it determines, one person's future. What college, how much money will I make? Wow, that's an enormous amount of pressure for what is a child. A 17-year-old is a child.
They are a child. Yes, that's right. And I'm thinking as well, like my grandparents didn't go to university. And my dad did, my mom didn't. Uh, but my grandfather was always like, you have to speak English. You need to go to college and get a degree. If you can get a master's or a PhD, that's even better. But you need to be in school at all times and learn English and speak English. So as a result of that, I don't really know how to speak Mandarin because of all these expectations of the past that have been
Yeah.
inherited. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember when I was in primary school, they used to post our results on the classroom door outside. So everyone can see who got the lowest marks, who was the first, and then you can compare it with different classes. And the parents at the time would be like, oh, my daughter is here, my son is here.
Wow.
Yeah. They still do that.
Do you think there's going to be a change with this research in Malaysia? Or is it maybe slow? It's very entrenched in the cultural system.
Yeah, the Asian and British tradition that we have inherited. Because my brother went to Cambridge and they also do the same thing. They put your results out all out for everyone to see. And the further down you go, the worse you are. You want to be on the top part of the hill. I always tell parents when their kid is not doing so well, like they got 3 Bs, which is great to me. And they're very kind kids. They're really great. They talk to their friends. They're very eloquent. But the parents would just come and like, why this 1 C? I'm saying, but your son is so kind to his friends. They're like, yeah, but that doesn't earn anything. I'm like, no, actually it does.
Yeah.
But a lot of them are still like, how come they are not getting this A or this mark still? And I've seen that become better over the years, but there's still this, mentality. It's very hard to shake. So I feel like in Malaysia, it's going to take a while.
Yeah. How neat though, Tabitha, that you're a principal of a school because you have the ability to make a change at your school and make a change for the kids at your school and how they experience standardized testing and anxiety and stress around it.
But hopefully I'm doing it.
All right, so to kick us off, in 1 or 2 sentences, what problem in education does your research aim to address?
So when I was doing my research at Hopkins, I was looking at my life journey as an educator and as a student as well. And a lot of my journey stems from exams, high stakes examinations. So my research was on high stakes examinations and how it impacts student well being and figuring out a way to look at neuroscience and applying it to this problem of students not being freaking out whenever they are approaching a high stakes exam.
Yeah, this is super timely, Tabitha, because right now is testing season. What first drew you to this line of research? Was there a classroom moment that sparked it?
When I was sitting for my own high stakes exams, right, I was incredibly stressed and I had all these physiological symptoms as well. Stomach aches, headaches, had debilitating migraines until I couldn't see. And I was like growing up after every exam. So actually, it's very funny because I decided at 17 after my high stakes exams in Malaysia that I wanted to go to America to study because the exams there to me at the time did not seem as high stakes as it was in Malaysia or in the UK. So I did go to the US to learn more about education because I thought that there was a better capacity to explore studying and how to learn in the US and not have to think of an exam, like a big exam at the end of the year. But it's really funny now because I think the US is moving towards having more high stakes exams. And I feel like that's really sad because the merit of a US education as an outsider was that they did not have these high stakes exams.
It's awesome not only that you're my first international guest, but it is so neat to have the view of education from a different from a different lens. One thing I love about this podcast so far is that I've had educational researchers, I've had principals, I've had sociologists, and the collaboration of all of those different areas really helps inform education research so much better than from one lens. And so it is so interesting to hear your perspective from a different country and a different system, because I think the way we improve education is by all of us globally sharing our best ideas and figuring out how to do this together.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. Yeah.
So who should care most about this research? Teachers, administrators, teacher educators, policymakers, and why?
It's very useful for teachers, educators, teacher prep people such as yourself, principals like myself, policymakers. I would hope that maybe one day they would read about this a little bit more, but I feel like sometimes it's kind of pushed to the side because it doesn't seem as important or bringing in any revenue of that sort. So right now, I wrote the research for principals, teachers, and any kind of teacher educators who want to improve how teachers teach and how students learn.
Wonderful. So for listeners who aren't familiar with this line of research, what are 2 to 3 key findings or important facts?
So when I was doing my research, I found that students in high stakes exam environments experience both psychological and physical stress. So a lot of people think, okay, you have the usual stomach aches and headaches, and that's maybe because you didn't sleep well or you didn't eat too well because you're so nervous for an exam. But actually, through my research, I found that the preparing for the exam itself and sitting for the exam causes these psychological, physiological stress. So we always think about stress in a non-physical way. Stress is an abstract thing, but we sometimes fail to see the physical signs of that stress, especially when it comes to exams. So in high achieving cultures, the stress is often normalized. So of course you have to be stressed. And of course you might have a stomach ache. It's probably because you didn't sleep and because you need to do really well for the exam. If you don't have this kind of stress, especially in a Malaysian culture, some people might think that you're too chill or you didn't study enough and maybe you're not doing as well as your other friends. So neuroscience shows that chronic stress, especially when it translates into a physical stress, reduces your working memory and the ability to retrieve information. It's kind of like a duh thing. Of course, if you didn't sleep well, you probably can't remember much. But it's actually a very important factor to think about, and something that teachers know, but they don't understand why. Learning about the why of it or the neuroscience of it helps teachers increase students' motivation and helps them improve on their intrinsic motivation. I also learned that there is a growing work in neuroscience showing that learning is embodied. So the brain and body are not separate. When students' states directly influence how they think and learn. So when students are stressed physically and emotionally, it affects their attention, memory, and performance. Students are often aware of their stress, but the systems around them do not adequately support them. When you understand that learning is embodied, that thinking has to shift and change instead. So when teachers care about well-being, they do not contribute too much to pressuring their students to do well, and they can change the way they prepare students for these high stakes exams or even just for their lessons. So this aligns with ideas from Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett on how emotions and bodily states are constructed and influence your cognition.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because I think about the prep that we do in the US for standardized testing. I only ever worked elementary school, so I can't speak to older ages, but even with my son right now, we get an email, the night before, make sure to have a good night's sleep and eat a good breakfast. But I imagine that's not super helpful advice if someone is so stressed out that they can't go to sleep early and eat a good breakfast. So
Yes.
what can teachers do or what can schools do to help with this?
So I developed a training program that I'm trialing at the moment, but the simplest ways that we have improved on reducing student stress is by changing the strategies that we use in the classrooms. Coming into the classroom the traditional Asian way, and I think I used to see this in the US as well. Come in, we maybe do a bit of a warm up and everyone take out your books. By the time you reach that instruction, it's very stress inducing for those students who are already anxious or the ones who did not get a lot of good sleep. So I think rethinking that strategy into, okay, how is everybody doing today? I think elementary teachers do this really well. They have the emotions chart. How are you feeling today? But by the time you reach the teenage years, they think, I don't want to ask teenagers how they feel, but I think we need to rethink that as secondary school teachers or high school teachers and start with like, okay, how are you actually feeling? And instead of saying fine, asking more probing questions like who got 8 hours of sleep last night, who got 12. And the teacher also has to be a little bit vulnerable and say, oh, I only got 5 hours of sleep because I was also worried about your test today. So starting out with just asking them about themselves in this way helps the teachers bond and also helps the teachers see who is stressed and would need some additional help. So if we have 5 students who are really stressed out, the teacher would go in and say, okay, let's do a bit of breath work. Okay, let's just breathe in and out. Let's just keep it simple so that students can remember this is a simple step that my teacher has taught me how to do. And it seems very obvious and it seems very like, is this really something we should study about? But a lot of teachers don't do this and a lot of students don't know this as well. Students, most of the time, they don't know how to study, but even more so, they don't know how to regulate their emotions. So it's up to the teacher to give these small, attainable, and memorable ways to calm the students down and give them a safe space to be vulnerable and tell the teacher, actually, I don't think I can sit for my exam today because I, I just feel like I want to throw up. And the school also should steps in and they get to say, okay, do you want to take this half an hour later or do you need to sit down alone somewhere? Do you need to do something else instead with your hands? Like we have these like stress balls or knitting corners. Yeah, just something that they can do that can take away focus from their exams for a short while, so that when their systems are all calm, they feel good, they can go back and do this right now. So those are very it seems like obvious steps, but they really have been very helpful with some of the students that I've done it with.
Yeah, that's great. We can't always delay a test, right? The testing time starts at this time, it ends at this time, it's this day, and that's it, unless you're absent, there's no makeup. But I love that idea of doing something else with their hands. I, as a teacher, since I was special education, they had to take the same tests. I wasn't as anxious of a person about them because I knew we might have a good day, we might have a bad day. Me putting all of my energy into those tests was not going to be productive for anyone. But I remember being in school even and observing other teachers, and it's very rush, rush, rush. Make sure on school at time so we can all use the bathroom, so we can get our sip of water and rush to the testing room. Because at first when you were talking, I'm like, oh yeah, this all sounds like you were saying, obviously, but I think you're right. I don't think we do it. And in the US, standardized testing is so high stakes, not only for the kids, but also for teachers and schools, because it affects evaluations and school grades as well. So yeah, I don't think I slept well, even though it wasn't high priority. I didn't sleep well the night before my kids tested. And now I have pre-service teachers working on their Florida teacher certification exams. And my students have shared with me, I feel prepared for the test, but I'm walking into the room and I'm failing. And so I started asking them why. If you know the content and you're passing practice exams, and they'll tell me things like, oh, well, this one person was tapping their pencil the whole time next to me and I couldn't focus. I got one question wrong and my mind went blank for the rest of the test. So we started doing mindfulness and breathing and talking about that in class. But it's something that seems so simple, but I hadn't even considered until this semester when I was trying to really get at the core of why my students are not passing their exams. And I don't think we do it well, maybe, in any level. So those are great.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. As adults as well, maybe it's a cultural thing. I'm a millennial, and a millennial who grew up in Asia. So it's very like, if you have an emotion, you need to keep quiet and keep it inside because nobody has time for this. I really like the Gen Z people now because they're always like, wait, we need to chill or we need to do these certain steps because we need to take care of our well-being. And I'm like, that seems like a waste of time, but actually, no, it's true. It's not a waste of time. We have to reframe our thinking and insert these sort of short bits so that they can succeed a little bit better.
I love that it helps us reframe. I think it's a positive shift towards knowing ourselves and knowing what we need first, because it does seem like a waste of time when there's so much stuff happening in front of us, but it's
Yeah.
not, because it could, ruin the whole day if we don't take care of that first. So that's a really good point. Do you have any other concrete examples of how you've seen these strategies done really well?
Concrete examples would be starting a lesson by asking students to write down 3 things they remember from the previous lesson. And this is taught in a lot of teacher prep as well. But I found through my experience of supporting teachers over the past few years, they do this really well at the beginning, at the start of the term. And then once they need to catch up on the syllabus or they think that they have a pretty good rapport with students, they stop doing this until they think, oh, wait, they aren't remembering very much, so I need to do it again. So a key thing would be the consistency of any of the the strategy that you're doing to help the students. So activating prior knowledge is one of the best ways to help them with retaining information, especially for a high stakes exam. And also before exams, using short, low stakes quizzes to strengthen retrieval. In the US, I think they do this really well. There's lots of pop quizzes, lots of short little assignments. In places like Malaysia, there's not a lot of these pop quizzes or short little assignments to strengthen the retrieval. And also, another kind of obvious thing is to break instructions into smaller steps to avoid overwhelming students. So, getting the students excited about the content, having them attach that feeling, but also breaking instructions into smaller steps or breaking whatever content I'm doing into smaller steps would help them do better when they reach that high stakes exam. During high pressure periods, I would also avoid stacking multiple deadlines unnecessarily because they are even more anxious and stressed out near to the exam. So at that time, when a lot of teachers are like, oh, we need to do units 1 to 5, maybe at that time, a better thing to do would be to slow it down and think, okay, let's just focus on unit 3 because most of the students didn't do too well in that. So that so that students, they're more prepped for the exam and they don't feel too overwhelmed by the time they reach the exam. But small moments that regulate students' physical states also help, such as pausing briefly or having a slower pace from the teacher. This also supports learning because, again, cognition is influenced by your physiological state. So if I'm super rushed talking to my students, I'm actually causing more of the stress or anxiety sometimes. Having a teacher who's very aware of their delivery and their emotions really does influence the students' emotions and well-being, especially in a high-stakes exams environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know the
Mm.
end of the year is crunch time. It's like, okay, we're going to review everything that we did this whole year. So breaking it up makes more sense, and that consistency throughout the year so it doesn't become this thing that you forgot from 6 months ago, but something that you've been working towards. Are there grade levels, content areas, or student populations where this research is especially impactful?
I would say it would be impactful for all ages because understanding or setting the groundwork for how students think about their emotional well-being, especially in high stakes, when you study earlier and they're more aware of their emotions and how to regulate them, helps as they grow and become teenagers in the future. If you can set that foundation at a lower grade and then slowly adapt it as students age, that would help the most. So even me, even as an adult, I feel like I learn new things about my emotions and how to regulate it when I'm in a high stakes environment. It's a continuous learning type of thing, and there's lots of different research recently on embodied cognition. Lisa Feldman Barrett and Imordino Young, Dr. Marielle Hardiman, who does the brain targeted teaching method as well, and she's inputting more emotional resilience and regulation stuff. So in the world of education, embodied cognition and stress in high stakes environment is really starting to come up now.
There's always more we can learn, but I'm glad there's attention to this in the US in terms of standardized testing. Recently, there's been a lot of scrutiny around it because in the US, we're finding that students are not scoring as high as generations before because of technology use in the classroom, over reliance on these packaged computerized intervention programs that don't actually seem to be doing a whole lot. There's lawsuits against some of these companies. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes in the next few years. With COVID here in the US too, a lot of schools got rid of SAT requirements, and the research around how that doesn't actually show if someone is ready for college or not, the way that it has been packaged and promoted to do. So it will be really interesting to see where this takes. You answered this a little bit just now with like how you think about emotions and high stakes testing. Any other way that you want to talk about how your own thinking as a researcher or educator has changed because of this work?
Yeah. The way that I look at stress before I started my research was like this giant cloud, dark cloud that hangs over every student's head or every teacher's head. And so I always saw stress as kind of like this monster thing that would plague all my students forever and ever because nobody's ever going to take away high stakes testing because they need a measurable way to figure out if a student is doing well or not. But after my research, I thought, okay, stress is beneficial sometimes because we need stress to survive, or you need some stress. Some students use stress as a kind of intrinsic motivation to do well, to do better. But it doesn't have to be so scary. You just need to understand it a little bit more. And just learning about your amygdala, your prefrontal cortex, and how all the little bits in your brain work. When you understand what is going on in your brain, it kind of tells you this is normal. It's okay to have stress, and I know what's triggering this sort of stress physiologically in my brain. But I have a way to deal with it. It's not something scary and abstract. It's something that I can pinpoint. So after my research, I thought, okay, this is this is something that we can deal with, and we need to pay attention to it so that all the learning, all the good work that we're trying to do in the classroom gets to their students' brain and is retained there until they sit for the exams or until they need to use it in their work.
Yeah, that's super interesting too. This direct teaching of this is the part of your brain that's doing this right now. It's a natural response. And I think that in and of itself could be a very powerful tool for acknowledging you're not the only one that feels like this. There's a lot of us right now, maybe all of us, like you were saying, teachers too, that are
Yeah.
feeling this way. Is there anything in there that you want to add to the conversation?
I think for pre-service teachers, it's also important to think about teachers' context before they come into teaching, how they were taught themselves and how it affects their teaching. I think some form of understanding of why teachers teach the way they do or how they feel about teaching is important before they start.
Honestly, probably in every episode, if not most of them, that has been something that my guests have talked about, specifically in relation to social emotional learning and trauma. And so this makes sense too, because I imagine considering the way that you feel about the exams that you're giving and your emotional state, understanding that is very important to getting your students ready for an exam and how you felt going through those exams. It's interesting hearing you talking about growing up in Malaysia and the exams and how you felt, and then sort of my difference. I was thinking about my own experience just now when you were talking about that. Elementary school didn't feel stressful to me at all, but I don't believe that we had this retention year and it was as big of a deal when I was in, elementary school in the 90s. But high school with the advanced placement exams and SAT and ACT and the focus of basically these determine your future is very high stress. So I imagine if I taught in a high school, maybe my response to and ways I prepped for those tests would be way different.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just thinking as well, like I have this whole trauma with high stakes exams. And my daughter, who's in kindergarten, she has assessments and they're not super high stakes. But I feel like they're high stakes for her because I have this need sometimes to always be the best. I'm like, did you get everything correct? And I'm like, oh, no, 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 I need to change that. Like, if you only got 9 out of 10, that's really great. Or I shouldn't say you only got, like you got 9 out of 10. That's really amazing. So I feel like because I've understood my response to high stakes exam, I have this inclination to put my ideas on my daughter and make her feel the same way. And so I kind of have to stop myself and be like, no, no, no. She actually enjoys this. It's weird to me that people enjoy tests, but my own daughter loves it. So this is something I need to learn to encourage.
So, what questions remain unanswered? What are you studying next?
I'm still studying a little bit more and trying to understand the body and mind connection and how it would pertain to teaching. I'm also trying to figure out a way to increase teacher motivation. So, I think in Malaysia, I'm sure in the US as well, because there's so much testing, there's a lot of changes in the curriculum, and it's a really stressful job teaching, but it is exacerbated by social media, AI, and things like that. I'm trying to think of a way to to keep that passion of teaching alive in teachers because I've seen so many teachers start to burn out and start to think like it's a bit hopeless now, or students are not like how they used to be. So I'm just trying to find that why, like trying to give teachers this why. I feel like that makes the whole teaching and learning experience more wholesome. And I'm not sure if I talked about self-determination theory by DC and Ryan. Need competence, autonomy, and relevance so that you are more intrinsically motivated to teach or learn. So I apply those three facets to my teacher prep and also when I'm teaching students as well.
It's really interesting. The episode actually that will come out a couple weeks after yours is from a principal who that's his area of interest and his area of work is intrinsic motivation in teachers. So how do you keep going when you want to be there on some level, but it's really, really hard? So it's interesting because you all are both principals, so this must be something that, of course, you guys are interested in retaining your best people at your schools. So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And where can educators go to learn more about your work?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I have a school website, tlsinternational.edu.my.my. I also consult sometimes, and it's called Brain-Based Teaching. So they can also find me on tntconsultancy.com.
Wonderful. And I'll link all of the websites in the show notes so that everyone has access to those.
That's great.
I think you're doing incredible work. It's really relevant here this time of the year, but it sounds really crucial to children's development where you are. I think that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Research to Practice Gap. If this episode challenged your thinking or gave you something practical to try, share it with a fellow educator. You can find us on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Facebook at the Research to Practice Gap, and subscribe anywhere you listen to your podcasts so you never miss an episode. If you have any questions, feedback, or would like to be featured on the podcast, you can reach out to us at research2practicepod@gmail.com. Research doesn't change classrooms, educators do. Until next time, keep reflecting, keep questioning, and keep bridging the gap.